it's very difficult to get to a point of winning in Formula One, like so immensely difficult. But it's even harder to maintain that process, to maintain that winning capability.
Today's guest is someone who has spent more than 20 years operating at the very highest level of motorsport. Andrew Sammut-Alessi has built his career inside Formula One and the World Rally Championship, leading complex technical operations, delivering high-stakes programs, and helping shape some of the most competitive teams in the sport. He spent over a decade with Red Bull Racing and Red Bull Technology, working his way from aerodynamic engineering into leadership roles across design, production, and operations. More recently, he has served as the head of technical operations at the Aston Martin Formula One team, where he was responsible for driving performance across one of the most demanding environments in elite sport. Andrew specialises in operational transformation, building high-performance teams and delivering under pressure where the smallest margins make the biggest difference. Andrew, welcome to the High Performance Leaders podcast. Thank you very much for joining us on our first episode.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, for people who don't know you, Andrew, you have been in Formula One for nearly 20 years, and you've also been in the WRC. And most recently, you have held the position of head of technical operations at the Aston Martin Formula One team.
Yep.
But just take us all the way back, Andrew. How did you get into the sport, and what led you to join Formula One?
Yeah, well, first of all, James, thank you very much for having me on the show. Really a pleasure for me to be here. So, let's go back to probably 1996, which is actually pre-motorsport career. I ended up studying automotive design at university. And while doing that, I sort of got in with a group of people who were incredibly keen sort of on car design from a styling point of view. And as one of our modules was computer-aided product development, and my peer said to me, this is the tools that McLaren use to design a Formula One car. And it was at that point, it was kind of really a bit of a light bulb to say, well, that feels like sort of a good direction to go in. I mean, even earlier than that, I suppose from a motorsport point of view, it was actually my mother that got me into motorsport, which, through the 80s and early 90s is probably a sort of strange thing to say, because usually it's the fathers. But
very true.
Exactly. My dad was he's a hotelier, so he was working flat out on the sort of business side. And my mum was a hugely keen sports person, just incredibly competitive, and essentially instilled that in us. And one of the things she used to love was Formula One. So I remember as a kid watching Formula One on the TV, maybe not quite getting it at the time, but yeah, it was really great to watch, seeing Nigel Mansell and all the other greats in the sort of golden era of Formula One.
Indeed.
Yeah. So actually, university was an opportunity to study automotive design, and really it was a sort of second choice career for me. Believe it or not, I did actually want to become a doctor.
However, really? How interesting. Okay.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of engineers are people who formerly wanted to do medicine, but for me personally, I didn't actually end up getting the grades to do medicine. And then ended up getting into car design. Just I think by chance.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because you were looking at you where you are, you would expect that you started out adamantly wanting to be an F1 car designer. Yeah,
quite. I mean, I can definitely say it wasn't the plan, but at the same time, once I was sort of committed to the journey and I saw the possibilities of the world in front of what is possible, it was really a bit of a no-brainer that. For me, and because I am a competitive person, and anybody who knows me will say that. Although I do quite a good job of hiding it, I'm sort of relentlessly competitive, and
I guess you need that then to excel in the industry.
Definitely, and I think going into any industry, whatever industry I would have gone into, I would have been competitive in that industry and then tried to get to the peak. And it just so happens that having chosen to study car design, then my friends telling me that Formula One used the tools that we're using in our design studies, Then actually, a good friend of mine whose sofa I managed to sleep on for an entire year ended up getting a job with the World Rally Team, and that's where it really sort of started.
And that was M Sport.
And that was M Sport, yeah.
Right.
And so that was my in, as
Brilliant.
it were. So it was genuinely a wonderful career start in motorsport. And at the time, I hadn't really considered Formula One, even though I was a big fan of the sport. I hadn't really considered it as the ultimate endpoint. And I think that goes in part to just being young and not really seeing the full picture and the full path. At that time, because you have a very short-term view of
absolutely.
Of
it's just the here and the now. So you didn't enter, into motorsport, joining M Sport, as effectively a stepping stone to get into Formula One. That wasn't really your destination at that point.
No, not at the time. It was. I wanted to be in competition. That was my main driver. Is I wanted to be in competition and competitive. And the opportunity to go into M Sport was really fantastic. And like I say, my friend who I'd slept on his couch, he got a job in the quality department, and then in the design group, because we were on the same course.
Yeah. And
he told me that there was an opening in the electronics department. So
and
that's where I started, drawing all the wiring looms, doing the form boards,
really?
And then electrical packaging, then driver controls, installations, driver installations, then moving through the various different disciplines into engine installation, systems design. And then ultimately towards the end, which is where the sort of real spark for aerodynamics came, I got to do a wind tunnel program for the rally team.
Right.
Now, the whole journey was inspired really by sort of my journey through M Sport was inspired through a gentleman who's unfortunately no longer with us, but a guy called Christian Bayer.
Okay.
And he ran the design team. The team had 6 people in it, and he had a very sort of open approach to the design team. He didn't have his favourites necessarily. And what he'd do is if there was a new job coming up, he'd just ask for a volunteer. You had to volunteer. You didn't know what you were volunteering for. You just had to volunteer. And that was it.
Okay.
So from a cultural point of view, he ended up generating this culture of proactivity and wanting to do things. If, if you were not volunteering, or if you were only trying to cherry pick the good jobs for you, there was no place for you.
So you had to volunteer, whether it was good or bad.
We didn't know. That was the point. So he would just say in the office, it was a very small office, about the size of this room, and he would say, who wants a job? And then it was just a show of hands. Who wants a job? And then, he would know what people are working on. And, I can't say that he was completely unbiased in everything. I'm sure if 2 people put their hand up and he knew somebody was slightly better at it, but at the same time, he would also choose to grow people who weren't necessarily as good in these independent fields. So he was really great. And that really shaped my sort of initial way of being in motorsport and my understanding of what a motorsport team actually is. It's this proactivity, this nature that it doesn't matter what the job is, the job needs doing, and therefore we need someone to do it. So if you can pick up a good job or a bad job, it's neither here nor there. You've got to do that job to the best of your abilities.
Absolutely.
And make it count, because it's all performance, really.
And it's all for the benefit of the team, not just
exactly.
You in your position in your career. It's
absolutely
what's best for the team.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then, through that course of learning, and then ultimately doing the aerodynamics program with M Sport, that opened my eyes to what the possibilities were to move out of rallying and into Formula One. And that was really the sort of catalyst at that point. Is, I really enjoyed the aerodynamic side, like working in wind tunnels, working wind tunnel models. It was fascinating. And I wanted to do more of it. But in a World Rally team, the budgets are tight, the regulations of the sport were changing, and it was potentially, being diluted as a sport, and the sport that I'd loved at the time. So
you were limited there into what you could actually do in the aerodynamics.
Yeah, absolutely. And very limited, and not just the aerodynamics, but the financial constraints that come with it, because the World Rally team at the time was operating on a budget of tens of millions, whereas a Formula One team is operating on a budget of hundreds of millions.
Wow,
Yeah. So
particularly in that time as well.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. In the unrestricted testing times as well. Got to bear in mind in Formula One, there was no restrictions when I joined. There was no restrictions on wind tunnel testing, no restrictions on budget, no restrictions on pretty much anything. The regulations was a series of boxes the car had to fit in. So it was very, very loose and really open to interpretation.
So very much it was, you could spend however much money you wanted to chuck at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite well documented, really, that some teams are spending in excess of $400 million, for the year. And when you look at that in the context of the cost cap now, which is a combined total of just over $200 million for your OPEX and your CAPEX, then, it's quite a significant step down in total available budget. Plus,
Absolutely.
You've also then got the restrictions nowadays of wind tunnel testing, CFD, and the other areas where in the early 2000s, there were teams that had multiple wind tunnel programs all operating 24/7, with no restrictions.
Absolutely. And they were racing at the weekend, and then, the driver was back on the test track on the Monday testing new updates.
Absolutely. This is quite a different playing field. So.
Absolutely. And I guess then you're one of the rare individuals who's actually experienced that.
Yeah.
That whole journey, the different eras of the sport, and now you're in a position whereby things are a lot more regulated. You're limited to what you can spend.
Yeah.
But for you then to enter into Formula One, how did that opportunity come around?
Yeah, so a really good question. I think, so first and foremost, I didn't get into Formula One at my first time.
Did you not?
No.
Wow.
It was third attempt to get into Formula One.
Really? With Red Bull?
So first attempt with Red Bull.
Yeah.
But I applied to McLaren.
Really?
And
Okay.
I got a thanks but no thanks, didn't get an interview, which was a bit of a shame, because
Absolutely.
at the time it's you're a 24, 25-year-old guy. It's a bit of a letdown. You build up to this application and then you get a thanks but no thanks. And then I applied to Williams as well. And got to the final round of interviews. It was for a composite design engineer.
Yeah.
Got to the final round of interviews. There was myself and one other gentleman from Jaguar, the Jaguar Formula One team. And they ultimately ended up choosing him because he had composite design knowledge. He was a composite designer already at Jaguar, and I was a bit more of a risk, shall we say. And then ultimately, a role came up with Red Bull in the aerodynamics department. And I had a huge amount of subject matter knowledge from having done that with M Sport. Went to the interview, and quite frankly, we just talked, just like this, talked for a couple of hours on aerodynamics, wind tunnel testing, the pros and cons. And I don't think he actually, Sean, who was the manager at the time, I don't think he actually asked me any real technical questions. We just sort of riffed about aerodynamics and wind tunnel testing, and because it was so natural, it just felt like a great fit, and I'm sure that was reciprocated, and they made me an offer. So clearly they thought I was the guy for the job. So.
But that's a prime example. One wouldn't expect, the level that you've got to now, that you struggled to secure your first job in Formula One, that you had, so only the third attempt that you were successful, and then the rest is history.
Well, quite. And actually, I think that really stood me in good stead. And if I'm honest, the upbringing in M Sport under the two Christians, so Christian Bear and Christian Loriot, Christian Loriot was like this mad scientist, and Christian Bear was this sort of organized German, very, very sort of, he had a very particular way about doing things, but he was the guy who fostered this real team culture and spirit. Having a wide area of, like a wide work range over the whole car. When I then got into Formula One and had a single point of focus, it was really a very small subset of the skills that I actually did have at the time. I mean, I was quite amazed at how focused I was getting into Formula One. The fact that I was only doing one thing, whereas previously I'd been working with suppliers in the workshop,
Yeah.
stripping and rebuilding cars myself, doing accident damage reports, and a huge amount of additional work. So
yeah, you're less of a Swiss Army knife then, really. You're just sort of that focused on that one area,
exactly,
and become a real expert in that subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely. But then, like I say, the fact that I didn't get in first time to a Formula One team made me want it more for a start.
Yeah, it obviously didn't put you off.
Didn't put me off. No, definitely not. And then the fact that I had this really broad skill when I went in, actually, I put that down to I put my acceleration through the business as a direct outcome of me having a broad knowledge.
Absolutely, you know what each department is doing, and you know all of this terminology. And obviously, you started off in electronics, which going from electronics to aerodynamics, you wouldn't naturally put the two together, would you?
No, not at all, not at all. And that's where building that blended skill set was incredibly important. That when I got into Red Bull and then had the opportunity at Red Bull to express that knowledge in various different conversations, I think that's where people could see there was a bit more to me than just just designing wind tunnel model components.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
You're too kind.
I'm seeing that now. But no, it's amazing that you mentioned there that it took you 3 attempts to get into the sport, because naturally people would assume that you'd be very successful on your one first application, but it's actually that persistence that paid off.
Yeah.
Actually, they've turned me down. I actually want this even more.
Definitely. And I suppose that would be a message I'd share with others, that question whether you want Formula One to be your first stepping stone, or whether a small motorsport team, a smaller environment where you get a wider range of responsibilities because of the nature of the organisation. It's less well funded, so more people, so fewer people have to do more jobs, is actually a better experience that then leads you into Formula One. But I think there's a very critical timing element to that. If you spend too long outside of Formula One and want to get into Formula One, then potentially you're sort of past the point of entry at the appropriate level, or the level you think you warrant within Formula One.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, from my own experiences, you see that a lot of people want to make that move, but maybe they're a bit too far along in their career and life, and can't necessarily take that step down, or to pivot into the Formula One team. But I think you'll probably talk to a lot of your peers of the same era, and that foundational level experience you had in M Sport, being exposed to the whole car, all the different engineering disciplines, stood you in great stead for where you are now.
Exactly. I mean, it's almost like an apprenticeship, because you're covering so much wide knowledge base. It's like an engineering apprenticeship that you get the opportunity to do all of these wonderful different things.
Absolutely.
And then when I chose to specialise, well, that was the point at which I jumped into a Formula One team. And I was 5 years into my career at the time, so not a huge amount, and it wasn't necessarily a backward step in a hierarchical sense, more of an adjacent step into a similar level role, just in a bigger organisation.
How different was the step then, going from WRC, which is a top name in M Sport, to then into Formula One? So you've now arrived. How different was that environment for you?
I mean, hugely different. I think, to contextualise, I remember my entire budget for the wind tunnel programme at M Sport was a little under £50,000, and one specific wind tunnel test, which had 25 options of cooling, cost £32,000 at Red Bull. So, you're looking. You've
just
got
the numbers
are just completely mind-boggling. So that is just the expression of how much the budget there is in Formula One, and how much they're looking for performance, and the profile of the sport. But realistically, what that did also do was instill a sense of value into me. So because I was used to understanding the finances behind the delivery of a project, coming from M Sport, because ultimately it was a private company, it wasn't a manufacturer.
Money's everything, isn't it?
Money is everything, exactly. So going into Formula One, you could see all of this money being spent for very small marginal gains, and that was the single biggest standout thing for me is, the amount of money that's being spent. And then, realistically, the other side of the coin is whether, the perception of Formula One being the pinnacle of everything really played out as the reality,
So are you trying to say then it wasn't, you got the glitz and the glamour that you see on television, and then you arrive and it's a little bit different to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess until you've got lived experience, it's never going to quite match what you create in your own mind. And as you say, with, Drive to Survive and seeing it on the TV and the glitz and glamour around the whole industry, I mean, you'd expect maybe that somebody builds a perception that glitz and glamour percolates all the way down through to the engineers at their desk making the decisions. But
absolutely,
but it doesn't really. And sometimes the reality of the situation is, what's the least bad decision we can make, But that's intrinsic in motorsport.
That's interesting, your perspective on that. And I think for a lot of people, they really don't comprehend what's involved in engineering and manufacturing a Formula One car. They see Drive to Survive, they see the race on Sky Sports, but actually, there's so many moving parts, so many resources, so many people involved in bringing that to life for the two drivers to step in and go racing on a Sunday. So could you just sort of paint a bit of a picture actually behind the scenes, behind the television, what actually goes on in a Formula One team to engineer and produce these cars?
I mean, I think there's quite a significant challenge being faced by the teams behind the scenes. So let's contextualize that the team at the track is maybe sort of, when you take into account all the commercial hospitality people and everything, it's like maybe 100 people or so. The team at the factory is maybe 1,000 people or so. For a large scale team, your Mercedes and Red Bulls, they're looking at the thousands, or the 1,000. Yeah. And that's just on the chassis side. You'll have another 1,000 on the engine side as well. So there's a huge number of people that when you watch a race, if your car doesn't make it off the start line or through the first corner, obviously the camera pans to the garage and sees the people putting their hand on their heads. Yeah. But actually, you've then got another 2,000 people.
Everyone back at the factory.
Exactly, also putting their hands on their heads. Yeah. And from an engineering point of view, if the car, immediately, if the car doesn't make it off the line, if it doesn't make it through the corners, or if it has a failure, immediately the engineering team are on absolutely high alert, because A, if it is a breakage, you've got to do something about it, and B, if there was a damage, you then have to look at how you can recover the damage, or whether you do recover the damage at all, or if it's just in the cost cap environment, the sheer cost of the thing you've just lost. If there's a damage and it's impacted the actual chassis itself, that is quite a significant risk to your operations, and you've got to try and recover that. And depending on what time of the year it is as well, you may not have a surplus of chassis around you in order to just, deliver the next chassis and replace the one you've lost. So
there's a lot of juggling going on then. So you strategically, it depends actually what parts we have available. Can we?
Absolutely. There's we can't forget that Formula One started with a group of guys who just wanted to go racing and have a good time, and that's really one of the core philosophies that's still sort of shown at the track. And there's a huge amount of camaraderie up and down the pit lane, of, if needs to, you sort of make do and mend to get you through. You see the mechanics out with gaffer tape and heat guns and everything, trying to fix things. And there have been times where, your competitors' garages are actually
they'll help you out.
They'll help you out. They're the only source of resource that you've got. Brilliant. So sometimes it could just be with additional material or something. And, because everybody actually wants to see everybody racing. Nobody wants to see people not turn up and not successfully pass the start-finish line, So, there's, like I say, a real camaraderie at the track for that.
It's lovely to see that approach to sport and competition, though. It's sort of, it is... historically been a sport of gentlemen, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And then you look at sort of the rotation of the staff, actually, the majority of people who are at the track, they've worked in multiple teams. There's very few people who've just been, solely in one team. So
absolutely,
we'll get to know each other as well.
We all stay in the same hotels when they're away, aren't they?
Exactly. You see the same faces.
Live in Oxfordshire, Northamptonshire, typically.
Definitely. But I just want to sort of maybe go back to your original question, because I got quite sidetracked on the track and the.
Well, I think I'm an engineer from my background, but I think for most people they don't comprehend what actually goes in to these cars. I mean, from the outside looking in, it's the pinnacle of technology, but also engineering processes, manufacturing processes. But in terms of actual resources, departments involved in bringing this design to life. So what typically for your normal Formula One team, let's talk about the chassis side. What's involved in that journey?
I mean, it is a significant journey, and it's difficult to distill down into a few sort of short sound bites, as it were. But I suppose if we look at the chassis as a whole, so I'm not talking about the actual monocoque, just the chassis engineering and so the whole platform. Typically, the life cycle of the car happens in 3 different phases. So you have the first phase, which is the research phase. So before you have to actually deliver the car into your launch configuration, before you have to sort of get the car to track to turn a wheel, this is the research that you're doing in order to understand what it is you need to do to make a successful race car. In year-on-year stable regulation sets, your research is kind of done while you're racing at the same time as well, because it's a carryover, it's an evolution of the regulations.
So you've got one car that you're racing with, which I guess you're updating as well.
Yes, that you're updating. You're learning from that to then feed into the cycle of the new car. So you're doing that, and maybe there are some lessons learned from the car that you're currently racing, which are so architecturally embedded that you can't change, that this is your opportunity to try and explore that envelope a little bit more.
Right.
The second phase is then that route to launch. We now have to go beyond our research and define a pathway to deliver the vehicle.
So that's the path that you're committing to. This is
exactly
the engineering philosophy we're going with.
From our research, this is what we believe is going to be the best platform. Now let's explore that even further in sort of more specificity to get to the point where we can actually have a car we're happy with, that we can then turn up, in this year at the sort of end of January to turn a wheel. And that's a key milestone for the organisation, is what is your first car? And that's arguably that phase from, depending on the team, from late July all the way through to December is one of the very busiest phases of a Formula One team. And from an operational point of view, you're pushing your staff to the absolute limits.
I was just going to ask on that. I think, one thing people don't realise is when you said pushing your staff to the limits is the working hours that can be involved. It's not a 9 to 5 gig, is it?
Definitely not. It's absolutely a vocational career. And
so work-life balance doesn't really exist at times.
It doesn't really. And I mean, I've got a number of stories of just phenomenal levels of commitment from staff going above and beyond. I mean, if you actually work out the hourly rate of the staff during that winter period, I mean, their hourly rate is probably quite
so working
quite
for free
low,
at times,
because you're pretty much working for free at times, because you are doing continual, just day after day, and then some people won't be taking weekends, and actually some teams will look at depending on how aggressive they're being with their delivery strategy, they'll look at almost like a 7-day working week as an option for the engineering team to deliver the execution of the plans. So that means no days off. But
you can tell then people aren't doing this just for a paycheck, are they? They're doing it because they love what they do. It's that competition side.
Absolutely. And they want to win. I mean, everybody's in it because they want to be part of the legacy of their team. They want to win. And it doesn't really matter how old you are in a team. you've got peers who you used to work with, who maybe even you went to university with, and actually there's some sort of bragging rights in there as well. That you can
so you're all spurring each other on.
Exactly, spurring each other on. I mean, I remember at Red Bull years and years ago, there was a photo that got sent to us from McLaren, which was they'd pinned up Red Bull signs to try to
really,
to try and literally target us as their.
So it wasn't on the dartboard.
Well, I can't say if it was on the dartboard or not. It was pretty low res pictures, but at the same time, it was. But they were actively targeting us as the gold standard
you were the
to
competition.
beat. So we were the competition to beat. But that's the healthy rivalry that you get. You've got to put the competition first and foremost in your view if you want to be successful. And actually, that's where some of the nuance between internally in an operation it really lives, and where the difference between a Formula One team is and maybe a commercial entity is, because I mean, we can get into it. The competition within Formula One should be directly associated to your competitors. And not an internal competition between departments. Although maybe that's how you derive the best competition, is to pitch people against each other in friendly competition internally to sort of identify numbers and benefits that each team are delivering. But the reality of the situation is, in order to become a very high functioning F1 team, you need to focus on the fact that your competitors are external to you, not internal to you, and making sure that everybody is of the same mindset.
That's an interesting element you raised, in which in the corporate world, I guess not too many people have that approach, do they? Because you know who your competitors are, but you're not seeing them 24 times a year on a weekend, and you're seeing how good your competitors are in competition as such. It's where then people who are competitive are typically then focused on what's in it for them.
Yeah,
and progressing their career in the organisation. So, the sporting element of Formula One is quite different to the corporate beast.
Yeah, and as you rightly said, your measures are there for everybody to see. And
good and bad.
Good and bad. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say that when a team isn't performing well, and whether I've been part of that team or not, but when it's not performing well, and you see the commentary team really going in on them for poorly performing. The commentary team don't know why they're not performing well. It's speculation and everything. But you know what? That really does impact the members of the team, because they are proud of their work, and to see their work not succeeding isn't, it's a motivator for a start, but it can be a demoralizer as well. And
absolutely,
especially when there's that sort of bandwagon of people jumping onto it, then that can be quite detrimental to the morale of an organisation. And it's
indeed
it's part of the sport, because it is a competitive sport, but you don't see that necessarily in the commercial world quite as pointedly.
Well, absolutely, you don't. And I did want to ask you this. I mean, as a leader of the business, a very senior role, how do you protect your team, your culture, and when you are going through difficult times, whether you're not as competitive on track and you're trying to catch up, or something's gone wrong, or you're having a run of bad luck, I guess. How do you keep everyone working hard, giving it all, working 7 days a week, when they're not seeing that return?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a really difficult question to answer, because there are so many different reasons behind why you might not be performing. Because in Formula One, it's so incredibly complex. I mean, you can distill it down to whoever's got the quickest time around a lap, around number of laps, which is great. But then that is an expression of how well the company is functioning, and all of the decisions the company have made to get to that point. Because we're working within finite limits, where have we chosen to invest? From a tools point of view, from a performance point of view, from a people point of view, where has the investment been? What is our culture like, and how is our business operating? And, to some extent, you've got three main pillars, which are, the operations, the culture, and the people. And in order to be at the pinnacle, you need all three of those to be working as effectively as possible, or to have the best average out of everybody.
Yeah.
So when it comes to turning around like a series of unfortunate events or poor performances, you really need to get into your root cause analysis. Now, by root cause analysis, I don't necessarily mean laying the blame at anybody's door, because that in a time of crisis is potentially quite a detrimental thing to do. What personally I believe in is that you need to find a constructive way forwards to identify where the bottleneck or the problems actually lie, and then fill that with resource in order to remove the bottleneck or to turn around the performance deficit that you've got. The unfortunate reality is that sometimes the turning around of that performance deficit is not a quick fix. So once you get into that position where you've not invested in a certain area, potentially you lose correlation between your tools and the track, to actually turn that round can take a number of events in order to do that. I do recall there was a time at Red Bull where, the team lost its way aerodynamically.
Right.
We're talking sort of 10 years ago now, lost our way aerodynamically a little bit. And we identified that as a correlation issue between the track and the tools, which then means you have to do the research to go back in time in order to establish where that has crept in order to then
take action.
And then, but in that time, you might have put updates on the car configuration might be different, you've invested money. So then you have to potentially reverse back on each one of those steps to establish, well, where did we actually lose correlation on the track? And then bearing in mind, once again, you don't have unlimited testing on the track. So you've got to then do this diagnostic work, once every other week in the limited amount of time that you've got, while at the same time you're trying to prepare for a race.
And your competitors are trying to increase their performance as well.
Exactly.
Do the same thing, aren't they? So you constantly got a moving target, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's moving, and the pressure ramps up.
Yeah.
So from a leadership point of view, I guess the key parts really to take away are, you've got to do your root cause analysis, try to understand where is the problem coming from. Is it a performance related thing? Is it a correlative thing? Is there something around your transfer functions that is not transferring from your theoretical testing all the way through to your empirical data?
Right.
So that's key. Is there a limitation with your processes that's not enabling people to deliver performance in the way you'd like to? Or is there an issue with the manifestation of the concept into the actual execution of the design? Or is it something else? So I mean, it's like I say, it's incredibly difficult. So in terms of trying to keep the morale up, I think, how do you go about doing that? Well, you've got to show positive action. Clearly, positive action is important, because you've got to be actively looking for the root cause of the issue.
Okay.
For me personally, I think it's important to also make sure that we are not setting up blame for any of this.
So there's not a blame culture.
So
there's no finger pointing.
Exactly. There shouldn't be any finger pointing. There shouldn't be any blame associated as such, because nobody's there to do a bad job. Nobody's working all those hours that we've just talked about and putting in all of that whole hard work to deliver a poor product. That is absolutely not why they're there. It's such a vocational sport that people aren't there just to make up the numbers. I don't think you could sustain that amount of hardship.
Yeah, if you're intentionally not wanting to win.
Exactly.
Exactly. But conversely to that, you're one of the rare individuals who's seen a lot of championship winning success with Red Bull. How does that approach then differ when you are dominating? You're in a good position. You've got a very competitive car. You're winning races. How do you keep on top of your game? I mean, which I guess you are, but you could quite easily put your feet up, I guess, and sort of coast and not keep pushing. How does that environment differ to when things aren't so great?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose. Okay, so when it's not great, it's incredibly challenging, and as a leader, you've got to be galvanizing the team together. I also think in those instances, it's not always in fact, it's rarely the leadership that is going to come up with the solution. They're the resource owners who are going to put the resource into the right area and make it possible to fix that. But the reality is, the engineers and the subject matter experts, they're going to be the ones looking for the problems to fix.
Right.
So galvanizing the team to move forwards in a time of trouble is really the role of the leader at that point, to make sure that everybody understands what it is we're trying to do and how we're trying to move forwards. But then when you are winning,
which is what you're there to do, aren't you?
Yeah, well, absolutely. When you're winning, how do you maintain the motivation?
Absolutely.
How do you maintain the rhythm? It's very difficult to get to a point of winning in Formula One. Like, so immensely difficult, and so much hardship that goes into it. But it's even harder to maintain that process, to maintain that winning capability. Now,
is it the process, or is it the psychological side of staying there?
Once again, so many reasons. So, I mean, you've, at the point in time where you're winning, you have the best average out of everybody. And so that's across operations, people, and culture. That's your sort of best average. And as a leadership group, you've got to try and maintain that momentum as much as possible. Now, depending on how you got there, or how you believe you got there, you can sort of keep investing in those different areas. So when I was at Red Bull in a period of unlimited spending, we had I couldn't quite I didn't know the terminology for it at the time, but we had a really psychologically safe environment. Yeah.
Okay.
It was all about trying to find performance and trying to make sure that we delivered as much performance as possible. No idea was a bad idea as such, or there was no bad time for a good idea.
To go and try anything, really.
So as long as you've got a theory for why it's going to work, let's go and try it. And if it doesn't work, we're going to learn something. So it's a real high-performing, learning, psychologically safe environment. Yeah. Which was fantastic, because because we were winning, we sort of had that liberated sense that, well, this is what we can do. We can
builds confidence.
Builds the confidence, and also we had our talismanic leaders as well, Adrian and Christian, who were at the time, empowering in that way. If they were so performance focused that if there was any opportunity to find performance, they were keen to try and extract as much performance out of that as possible.
Yeah, it wasn't an exercise now, which I guess happens in many corporate businesses where we don't have the budget.
Yeah, well,
so we can't do that.
Yeah, indeed. So in that role, you're finding an opportunity to deliver performance, and actually you're being told it's okay to fail. I mean, don't always fail in the same way, but it's okay if an idea doesn't work.
So very much approach then that it's part of the curve of progression, really, and
exactly.
Improving the performance of the business, getting better and better.
Definitely. And different leadership took a slightly different view on that. Some would take a very forensic approach at trying to find performance.
Right.
And they would test theories and hypotheses, and they would actually test things they thought wouldn't work to prove that it doesn't work, to then affirm the positive direction they then need to take after that. So it's quite an interesting point of view. I sort of almost used to relate one guy to a little bit like being like Poirot. He's sort of testing his theories. He's working out what the solution is, and then ultimately he gathers all his ideas together and then picks the culprit that's going to be the way forwards. But
absolutely.
But the flip side of that is you've got a target on your back. So as the successful team, you create this sort of wonderful mindset and can-do environment that everybody feels like they can contribute and deliver performance to the car, which is brilliant. But all the other teams have a target on you, and they want to outperform you and out-deliver you, and take you back to that sort of picture from McLaren, where they're holding Red Bull cans up to show that you're their, you're their main competition, and they're out for you. They're gunning for you. So yeah. But I think it's incredibly difficult to stay on top, and in particular when as the sport has sort of moved and evolved, the regulations are being written in such a way to try and promote more competitiveness. Okay. So bearing in mind, this is maybe a period before we had the ratcheting of the aerodynamic testing restrictions, and also the sort of energy recovery systems we've got in place at the moment. So the the commercial rights holders of the sport, quite rightly, are looking to make an entertaining sport, and one car dominance doesn't deliver an entertaining sport necessarily. So
I'd just like to come back to a point you mentioned there about the budget cap, and you've had a successful career and had, I guess, the luxury of being able to experience a team when they've got can chuck whatever money they want at these projects. But now we are in a different time, and we've got the cost cap. How has that now approached the direction with technology and driving efficiencies in the business? Looking at the way you go about engineering and production and business operations as a whole. How have you now had to shift and, I guess, leverage technology to give you the efficiency, but also reduce any unnecessary costs in the business? And obviously with your engineers, I guess give them the time back, or the productive time to be engineering the components on the car.
Yeah, it's a genuinely good question, because the cost cap has had such a huge impact on the sport itself. I think it's had quite a positive impact in one way, which enables all teams to feel like they can be competitive if they were to spend their money wisely, which is good because it drives a certain amount of prudence into the sport. And also, it does focus a bit on value engineering as well, which I think is important. The question is, in terms of what is deemed to be the pinnacle of motorsport, the regulation is about sort of trying to maintain that best championship effort within the prudence of a sort of financial structure, So I've seen various different means of reconciling that sort of at play in order to try and ensure that the value proposition that you're putting forward is the best one in order to deliver the performance of the track. I suppose this is where, from a philosophical standpoint, you can look at the governance structure of each of the teams, because each of the teams will enact that, somewhat differently, and depending on their sort of how they seek to position themselves will depend on how they choose to enact their delivery of the compliance to the cost cap. And it's maybe sounds a little bit vague there, but I mean, what I'm trying to get to is that if there's an organization which will put performance over and above everything else, to some extent, they're operating exactly the same kind of window they were operating in before.
Okay.
You only have to look at the amount of updates Red Bull brought in 2025 to prove that. They were updating that car. There was a chance of delivering Max the title, so they were just focused, hell-bent on delivering performance of the car.
Yeah.
Performance of the car is the most important thing, and from a cost cap point of view, things will be sacrificed in order to deliver performance of the race car.
Okay, so you'll remove something from one area to then, I guess, have the resource.
Exactly. Yeah, all the
performance.
All the funding to deliver the performance. From another team perspective, where potentially they have stakeholders and shareholders to keep happy, there might, that limit to the threshold of where the value lies might come a little bit sooner, and they might not be as willing to bet the whole farm on delivering the updates, because there will be an internal balance they have to strike.
So a bit more conservative then.
A bit more conservative in their approach, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I suppose one of the benefits of the cost cap really is the ability to level the playing field across all of the teams. However, I think one of the things that's not necessarily spoken about sort of in wider senses is that in advance of the cost cap even being a thing, where there was unlimited spending, a number of teams built up an incredible capability and resource. And essentially, when the cost cap came along, that sort of baked in that capability to some extent.
Okay.
So if I have, a machine shop with 100 machines in it, and my competitor down the road only has a machine shop with 10 machines in it, and then you bring in a cost cap, how are they determined? How are they due to, or how are they supposed to get to the same competitiveness as my team with 100 machines? There were and are mechanisms to enable infrastructure to be improved. And I think that's evident with Aston Martin's new wind tunnel, for example. That was all using these abilities to level up your infrastructure, which is an agreed mechanism to do that.
Yeah.
However, there are just some tools and bits of software that, the teams who weren't investing heavily during that period of unrestricted spending will just find it incredibly difficult to catch up on. Even, 8 years into a cost cap, 6 years into a cost cap, it's going to be very difficult for them to make that headway.
Really? So, the big teams that, the top four, I guess, who've always had consistent success being there, realistically, with the budget cap coming in, they're kind of going to stay there. The rest have got to play catch up.
Yeah, exactly. Because they've got their infrastructure in place, the tools, systems and methodologies,
Yeah.
We spoke before about sort of the differentiation between teams, and some of these things are in sort of baked into the way a team operates, and like I say, in certain instances, their ability to deliver performance, is or was defined about making that as quick as possible to deliver as much performance as late as possible.
Yeah.
And any team that wants to try to catch up with that now has to invest in a restricted time in order to try and do the same thing. You can work smarter, you can, develop your own tools and everything. So you can, there are ways and means to do it, but,
it's still a big challenge then, isn't it?
It's a huge challenge,
because time is the one thing you can't buy, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
With your stellar motorsport career, and you've been exposed to the highs, the lows, operating at the forefront of engineering and technology, but in terms of people, leadership, and performance. If we then look at the corporate world, what would be one or some main pillars that a general business today could maybe take from Formula One to drive performance in their business?
There's a lot of commercial operations who'd be looking at Formula One and say, right, how can we capture some of this? How can we capture some of this magic?
Well,
that
a lot of businesses
are
just they're fixated on the numbers. Ran by finance people, and it's not until you dive deeper than that you start getting the answers.
Yeah, quite. I mean, so it's an appealing sort of thing to look at and say, right, they're clearly operating at a very high level. How do we achieve some of that? And I think, we've chatted about some of the values that a Formula One team has that maybe a commercial entity doesn't have. So let's go into that a little bit. So, for example, my personal belief is that in order for a Formula One team to be incredibly high performing, they need to have a very utilitarian outlook on how the team operates as a whole. And by utilitarian, what I mean is that the philosophy is everybody does everything that is in the best interest of the team, not in the individual, and not just following the rules necessarily. And this is how you find loopholes. This is how you get everybody pulling in the same direction. And in F1, for a very successful team, I believe a utilitarian approach is key, because then everybody gets it instilled them as this is how we get the team to perform. Everything I do needs to be viewed through a lens of team performance and what's in the best interest for the team, not what's in the best interests for me as a person, or just following the rules. So some teams, they do follow the rules, which is more of a deontological viewpoint. So they see the rule set and they go, well, these are the rules we follow.
Just black and white.
Black and white. That's the rules. So we stay within the rules, and then we try what's best for the team, but it's got to be within the rules. But then, arguably the challenge is the rules are the primary motivator to stay within, and they're never going to find those loopholes that is F1 is so legendary.
Yeah, so it's that cavalier approach then, really.
Exactly. It's maybe not so cavalier, but
taking a bit more risk.
But it's a risk appetite. Exactly. So it's being able to sort of deliver a higher risk appetite to think around the regulations, that if we could do this, the team would perform better. Right? How can we get this to work within the bounds of what it is that we're shown, and how do we make sure that this is in the spirit of the regulations, or at times even an interpretation of the way the regulations are written, but with a different viewpoint. Whereas in a commercial environment, I think for me, the challenges are that there might be more of a sort of a virtue signaling kind of structure. So by that, I mean, it's about the individual. What's best for me? How do I accelerate my career through this? How do I make myself and my department look good internally within this organization? You know? And so what that does is it brings the competition from being external, so you're competing against the other teams, to being internal and competing against the other departments. Now, some organizations might actively promote that, but the reality is, in order for everybody to pull along in the right direction, in my opinion, I think there needs to be something greater than the sense of self, and that's where I feel some of the big lessons can be learned from Formula One. Now, Formula One is incredibly easy, as we said, because 24 times a year you get your performance plastered all over the media outlets, and
you see how good you are against your competition. Don't you?
Exactly, which means it's very easy to focus on your competition as your competition. Whereas in a corporate industry, your competition might only be your internal competitors. You might not have that ability to see externally. And I think there is quite a challenge there. But I think sort of overall, if I could say where are the lessons to come from, I think it's that utilitarian approach of trying to build a culture within the team where everybody is looking for what's best for the team. And that means if you do that, you can have very constructive disagreements with your peers, because you understand their positioning. Their positioning is you're looking for what's in the best interest of the team, and so am I. And we can disagree, and we can have a constructive discussion about that, which is absolutely fine and the right thing to be able to do, because you need to have those discussions to try to progress. But as long as you understand everybody else's viewpoint in that sense, as in they're also looking for the best thing for the team, then it becomes a much less personal discussion and a much more constructive discussion to try and deliver the performance aspect that is the important thing for the team.
Yeah, I mean, particularly with Formula One, it's people just see the driver, don't they? And they don't realise the thousands of people, the moving parts, the complexity, and look, you're designing the world's fastest racing cars, but it's the pace in which the business moves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite often, that is the biggest challenge, is the relentless nature of the pace. The races are when the races are. The tests are when the tests are. You're either ready or you're not. Yeah. And if you're not ready, then you're not going to perform. So it's how can you be as ready as possible? And you've just got to get onto that sort of that cycle of timings, and really not just be looking at the here and now, but be looking at the 3, 6, 9, 12 months ahead. And as has been proven by a number of teams, if you do that and you do that successfully, that's how you secure enduring succession and enduring championships, year after year.
Absolutely. Make it sound very easy, but it's obviously not.
Yeah, if only. Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you once again, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.